I never meant to take over Richardson Industries. But standing in the mahogany-lined dining room of my in-laws' mansion, watching my mother-in-law Victoria Richardson attempt to humiliate me in front of the entire family, I realized that sometimes fate has other plans. My name is Elena Chen, and until last night I was just the lucky girl who married Michael Richardson, heir to an $83 million construction empire. At least that's what they thought. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last 3 years quietly becoming their company's salvation. I still remember the first time I walked into the Richardson mansion 5 years ago. Michael had been so nervous about introducing me to his family. They can be intense about the business, he'd warned. He wasn't wrong. Victoria Richardson, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and Chanel suits, had taken one look at my simple dress and decided I wasn't good enough for her precious son. "And what does your family do, dear?" she'd asked over dinner, her voice dripping with practiced politeness. "My parents own a small restaurant in Oakland," I'd replied honestly. The slight curl of her lip told me everything I needed to know about her opinion of restaurant owners. What I didn't mention was my MBA from Stanford, my years working in private equity, or the fact that I'd already spotted 3 major vulnerabilities in Richardson Industries' business model just from publicly available information. Michael and I married despite his family's disapproval. He was different from them, kind, genuine, more interested in his medical practice than the family business. "They're obsessed with appearances," he'd tell me, "but that's not what matters." I took a position at Richardson Industries as a junior financial analyst, much to Victoria's amusement. "How quaint," she'd said when Michael told her. "At least she'll have something to do while you're at the hospital." What Victoria didn't know was that I'd chosen that position deliberately. As a junior analyst, I had access to the company's financial records but was beneath anyone's notice. Perfect for someone who wanted to understand exactly what was wrong with Richardson Industries. And there was plenty wrong. Years of mismanagement had left the company vulnerable. Victoria and her daughter Rebecca had been more focused on maintaining their social status than modernizing their operations. They were losing contracts to more efficient competitors, their debt was mounting, and their technology was outdated. But the real problem? They were so convinced of their own superiority that they couldn't see the collapse coming. I spent my days doing basic accounting work, but my nights were dedicated to developing a rescue plan. I started small, buying shares whenever the stock dipped. Thanks to my private equity background, I knew exactly when to buy and how to keep my purchases under the radar. Michael supported me completely. "They never wanted me to run the company anyway," he said when I shared my concerns about Richardson Industries' future. "Do what you need to do, Elena. Just be careful. Mom and Rebecca can be ruthless when they feel threatened." He wasn't exaggerating. I watched as Victoria and Rebecca drove away talented employees who dared to suggest changes. I documented their dismissal of warnings about aging infrastructure and declining market share. Most importantly, I tracked every questionable decision they made, building a case that would prove crucial later. The catalyst came 3 months ago when I discovered something alarming in the company's books. Victoria and Rebecca had been hiding major losses, manipulating reports to maintain their lifestyle while the company bled money. They needed a significant capital injection within 6 months, or Richardson Industries would collapse. I could have taken my evidence to the board immediately, but I knew Victoria would find a way to twist it around. No, I needed something more definitive. So I waited, continued buying shares through various shell companies, and prepared for the right moment. That moment came sooner than expected at last night's family dinner. Victoria had insisted on a formal family gathering to discuss the company's future. Michael was stuck at the hospital with an emergency surgery, but I attended, curious about what Victoria was planning. The dining room was impeccable as always, crystal glasses gleaming under the chandelier, silver polished to perfection. Victoria sat at the head of the table, Rebecca to her right, various cousins and board members filling the other seats. I took my usual place near the end, quietly observing. "Before we begin," Victoria announced after the first course, "I have a delicate matter to address." Her eyes fixed on me with predatory focus. "It has come to my attention that someone has been acquiring significant amounts of Richardson Industries stock through various shell companies." The room fell silent. I took a sip of wine, keeping my face neutral. "At first we couldn't trace the purchases," Victoria continued, "but Rebecca's private investigator finally uncovered the truth." She stood pointing at me dramatically. This gold digger has been trying to steal our company. Gasps and whispers filled the room. Rebecca smirked, clearly enjoying the show. She married my son for our money, and now she's trying to take everything we've built. Victoria's voice rose with practiced indignation. Well, I won't allow it. The board meeting tomorrow will address this attempt at corporate espionage, and believe me, there will be consequences. Everyone turned to stare at me, waiting for tears, denials, perhaps begging. Instead, I carefully dabbed my lips with my napkin and stood. Thank you for a lovely dinner, Victoria, I said calmly. I look forward to tomorrow's board meeting. I'm sure it will be illuminating. How dare you act so smug? Rebecca snapped. We have proof of your stock purchases. You're finished. I smiled, gathering my purse. You're right about one thing, Rebecca. Someone is finished. I guess we'll find out who tomorrow. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Victoria, you might want to review the real company financials before the meeting. The ones you don't show the board. The color drained from Victoria's face as I left. In my car, I pulled out my phone and sent 3 emails I'd prepared weeks ago. The first went to the SEC with detailed evidence of Victoria and Rebecca's financial manipulation. The second went to the board members, containing the true state of the company's finances. The third went to my lawyers, confirming that everything was in place for tomorrow. As I drove home through the cool San Francisco night, I thought about how Victoria and Rebecca had never bothered to really look into my background. They'd seen my parents' restaurant and stopped digging. If they'd looked deeper, they might have discovered that the small restaurant was actually a highly successful chain of fusion cuisine establishments across California. They might have learned about my years in private equity, or the companies I'd helped rescue before. But they'd been too convinced of their own superiority to look beyond their prejudices. And tomorrow that blindness would cost them everything. My phone buzzed with worried messages from family members, but I only responded to one. Michael's. Mom just called, ranting about you trying to steal the company. You okay? Perfect, I replied. How's your patient? Stable. Should be done in time for tomorrow's meeting. Want me to come home? No need. Get some rest at the hospital. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. I smiled as I pulled into our driveway, thinking about the documents waiting in my home office safe. Proof of every bad decision, every manipulated report, every instance of Victoria and Rebecca putting their own interests above the company's. But more importantly, confirmation that I now owned 51% of Richardson Industries shares. Victoria thought she was exposing my plans tonight. Instead, she'd walked right into a trap that had been 3 years in the making. Looking up at the stars, I thought about something my father used to say when people underestimated our family. Let them judge us by our appearance. We'll teach them to judge us by our actions. Tomorrow would teach the Richardsons that lesson. But for now, I had a quiet night ahead of me, a presentation to review, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, the best revenge is simply being smarter than those who underestimate you. The real story would begin at tomorrow's board meeting. The Richardson Industries boardroom was already tense when I arrived at 8:45 a.m. I could feel the stares as I took my seat. Some hostile, some curious, all wondering what evidence Victoria had against me. The mahogany table gleamed under the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, perfectly polished like everything else in Victoria's world. Victoria and Rebecca sat across from me, both dressed in power suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Victoria's expression was triumphant, Rebecca's smug. The other board members filed in, followed by company lawyers and, interestingly, 2 SEC representatives I hadn't expected until later. At precisely 9 a.m., Thomas Weber, the board chairman, called the meeting to order. We're here to address serious allegations regarding stock purchases by Elena Richardson through various shell companies. Mrs. Victoria Richardson, you have the floor. Victoria stood, smoothing her jacket. Thank you, Thomas. Yesterday we uncovered evidence that my daughter-in-law has been secretly acquiring company shares through multiple entities. This is a clear attempt at a hostile takeover by someone who married into our family under false pretenses. She gestured and Rebecca began distributing folders. In these documents, you'll find proof of Elena's purchases, along with her questionable background. She presented herself as coming from a humble restaurant family, hiding her true intentions. I sat quietly watching the board members review the documents. Michael slipped into the room just then, still in his surgical scrubs, and took a seat next to me. Victoria faltered slightly at his appearance but pressed on. Furthermore, she continued, these stock purchases violate company bylaws regarding disclosure requirements. We demand immediate forfeiture of these shares and Elena's termination from Richardson Industries. Are you finished, Victoria? I asked quietly. She smiled coldly. Do you really think you can talk your way out of this? I opened my laptop. Actually, I have a few things to share with the board as well. I connected to the room's display system. First, let's discuss those company bylaws you mentioned. The screen filled with legal documents. The bylaws specifically exempt share purchases by family members from standard disclosure requirements. As Michael's wife, my purchases were completely legal. But that's not the interesting part. I clicked to the next slide showing a financial statement. This is the company's official financial report from last quarter. Another click. And this is the real one. The room erupted in murmurs as two very different sets of numbers appeared side by side. Victoria's face went pale. For the past 5 years, I continued, Victoria and Rebecca have been presenting falsified reports to the board. They've hidden losses, inflated profits, and diverted company funds for personal use. The SEC representatives here today have all the documentation. Rebecca jumped to her feet. You're lying. This is ridiculous. Is it? I pulled up more documents. Here are records of your personal expenses charged to company accounts. 3 vacation homes, weekly shopping sprees, private jet travel. All while the company's infrastructure crumbled and we lost contracts to competitors. Thomas Weber leaned forward. Mrs. Richardson, is this true? Victoria's composure cracked. We had to maintain appearances. The Richardson name means something in this city. We couldn't let people know we were struggling. So you committed fraud instead? One of the SEC representatives spoke up. We'll need you both to stay after this meeting. But I wasn't finished. The company needs $50 million in capital within the next 6 months or it faces bankruptcy. Fortunately, I have a solution. I distributed my own folders. A complete restructuring plan including modernization of our operations, debt restructuring, and new contracts I've already negotiated conditionally. And why should we trust you with this? Victoria spat. Because, I said calmly, as of last week I own 51% of Richardson Industries shares. And unlike you, I actually know how to save this company. The room fell silent as I displayed proof of my ownership. Years of careful purchases, timed perfectly to avoid affecting the stock price, had given me controlling interest. This is impossible. Rebecca shrieked. Daddy would never have let this happen. Your father, I said quietly, was a brilliant businessman who built this company through innovation and hard work. You and your mother have nearly destroyed it through greed and mismanagement. Michael, would you like to add anything? My husband finally spoke up. Dad always said the company needed new blood. He told me before he died that he regretted letting you two take control, Mom. He'd be ashamed of what you've done. Victoria sank into her chair, her perfect facade crumbling. The board spent the next 2 hours reviewing my evidence and restructuring plan. By noon, the votes were in. I was appointed CEO. Victoria and Rebecca were removed from all positions, pending criminal investigation, and my modernization plan was approved unanimously. As the board members filed out, Thomas Weber paused by my chair. We suspected things weren't right, he said quietly, but we never imagined the extent. Your father-in-law would be proud. Victoria and Rebecca were escorted out by the SEC representatives, both facing charges for financial fraud. As they passed me, Victoria stopped. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why did you wait so long if you knew? Because, I replied, you needed to learn that appearances aren't everything. My parents' small restaurant is now a $40 million business. I spent years in private equity turning around failing companies. But you never bothered to look past your prejudices to see that I could have helped you. The aftermath was intense. News of Victoria and Rebecca's fraud made headlines. Some family members stopped speaking to us. Others admitted they'd seen it coming. Michael supported me completely, proud that I'd saved his father's legacy. 1 year later, Richardson Industries had transformed. Our modernized operations and ethical business practices attracted new clients. Employee morale soared under transparent management. The company's value doubled. I kept Victoria's portrait in the boardroom, but added one of my parents next to it. They taught me that true success comes from hard work, integrity, and letting your actions speak louder than words. Victoria and Rebecca eventually pleaded guilty to reduce charges. Last I heard, they were living in Victoria's sister's guest house in Phoenix, their social status in shambles. Sometimes I wonder if they finally understand that their obsession with appearances led to their downfall. Michael and I recently held a company picnic for all employees and their families, something Victoria would have considered beneath her dignity. Watching our workers' children play while their parents chatted with senior executives, I realized we'd created something better than just a successful company. We'd built a community. The old guard of San Francisco society still whispers about me at charity events, the outsider who took over Richardson Industries. But now they whisper with respect and maybe a little fear. After all, I'm not the only gold digger who married into wealth. I'm just the one who proved I was worth more than they assumed. My office has a different view than Victoria's did. She chose to face the city's old money neighborhoods. I chose to face the bay, watching cargo ships bring goods from around the world. It reminds me that business, like life, is about looking forward, not back. Late at night, working on new expansion plans, I sometimes think about that family dinner where Victoria tried to destroy me. She thought she was exposing a scandal. Instead, she triggered her own downfall and the company's rebirth. I keep a photo on my desk from that night, the last picture of the old Richardson Industries regime. Victoria at the head of the table, Rebecca by her side, both looking triumphant. It reminds me that success isn't about appearing powerful. It's about being smart enough to build something lasting. Michael still practices medicine, refusing to join the business despite my offers. "You were meant for this," he tells me. "I was meant to help people my own way." His father would have understood. Sometimes the best way to honor a legacy is to build it into something new. As for me, I'm expanding Richardson Industries into sustainable construction, opening opportunities for minority contractors, and creating apprenticeship programs for underprivileged youth. Victoria's precious social status never built anything. Real power comes from creating something meaningful. The company's 50th anniversary gala is next month. Unlike Victoria's parties, it will celebrate our workers, not just the executives. Success means nothing if you don't lift others up along the way. I had the dining room where Victoria made her last stand converted into an employee training center. The crystal chandelier and antique furniture were sold to fund scholarships for employees' children. After all, the future is built on education and opportunity, not appearances and prejudice. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so much better than they could have imagined that their absence becomes a blessing. And that's worth more than all the social status in the world.